When I was 22, I started seeing a guy I met on a dating app. His name was Hunter. We went on 4 dates over the span of a little more than a month. At first, things seemed fine. Our first date was a quick coffee date, less than an hour, more of a screening process to make sure he seemed normal. Our second date was at a nearby bar for drinks. We both got a nice buzz, and it was a good time. The third date was dinner, and that's when I started to question things. I wasn't sure if I really clicked with his personality or if there was something slightly off about him. The date ended with a kiss, still the first and only time we ever kissed. I convinced myself that because I let him kiss me, things were fine. It wasn't until our fourth and final date that everything changed. We went out for drinks again, but this time, I went into it with a less excited mindset. I started paying more attention to his behavior, and I noticed little quirks that felt unusual. Some of his mannerisms gave off antisocial and borderline creepy vibes. He started drinking way too much and got really touchy-feely at the bar, trying to kiss me multiple times. I'm not a fan of PDA, especially not in a crowded bar, so I politely turned him down. Within a few minutes, I mentioned I was tired, heavily implying we should leave. He asked for the check, paid it, and we grabbed our coats. As we walked to our cars, he stopped me and bluntly asked if we could go home together. I said, "Not tonight, I'm tired and have work tomorrow," which was a lie. He kept pushing, saying he'd drive me to work tomorrow and such. I found it absurd, whether he was drunk or not. I also wasn't a fan of him drunk driving home. I made the decision then that I wouldn't see him again. I got in my car and started driving home slowly, cautious because I'd had a couple of drinks. I was overly alert, looking around for cops, which is why I noticed the same car behind me after I made at least 3 turns. At a stoplight, I realized it looked like Hunter's car. I texted him, "Are you following me?" He replied quickly, "Yes, I just want to make sure you get home okay." I called him, but he wouldn't pick up. This was so weird and creepy. I pulled over and texted him to stop following me, that I was fine. He stopped in the middle of the street for a second, presumably to read my text, and then drove off. He didn't text back until I got home and was in bed. He said, "I hope I didn't weird you out tonight. Sorry I got so drunk. Next time we should do something more low-key, like dinner at my place or something." I didn't answer. The next morning, he followed up with, "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" I waited a bit to respond, but not even 2 hours later, he sent me a question mark. I decided to reply before it got worse. I said, "Hey, I had a great time getting to know you, but I just think our personalities don't click that much. I also really just want to focus on myself right now. I hope you understand." That's when the angry texts started. The worst one was, "No, I don't understand. You strung me along for 4 dates to tell me that? How about you pay me back half of everything I bought for you?" There were a few other angry texts involving personal information, so I'm not going to include them, but they were enough to prompt me to block him. I thought this would be the end of it, but then I started receiving no caller ID phone calls non-stop. I ignored all of them until he finally seemed to get the message and stopped. The next day, when my parents weren't home, I got home from work to find a bouquet of flowers on the stoop along with a card. The card was an apology from Hunter, asking for a second chance. He somehow knew where I lived. That disturbed me. In his mind, he must have thought this would come off as charming or sweet, but in reality, it was extremely alarming. I sent a long and final text to him to please not contact me anymore and never come to my house again, or I'd file for a restraining order. I kept his number blocked so I wouldn't see his response. I thought things would be over now, but I couldn't have been more wrong. It was not long after this that I was home alone for the night. My parents' house is big, and I had a loft bedroom, which meant my bedroom was the highest point in the house. I awoke in the middle of the night to something. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but I felt as though I was hearing noises from downstairs. I tried my best to listen closely, and then I heard what was very obviously a door opening from outside my bedroom. Nobody was supposed to be home that night. Even in my haze from freshly waking up, I still immediately thought, intruder. I crawled out of my bed onto the floor and shimmied under the bed before calling 911. I texted everyone in my family asking, "Who's home?" I heard some distant noises from somewhere in the home, one of the other bedrooms, and then my bedroom door opened, and footsteps came up the carpeted stairs. After they reached the top step, there was silence. The whole room was carpeted, so I couldn't hear any potential footsteps. Then I heard the drawers next to my bed begin opening. I held my mouth with my hands to mask my breathing. I could feel my heart racing. I heard a man's voice say, "God damn it," under his breath. In that moment, I thought, wait, that might have sounded like Hunter's voice. I still didn't move, and I prayed my phone did not get any notifications. Now I heard more rummaging sounds. He was going through my entire dresser. Then I heard and felt the bed move as he sat down. I was staring at the outline of two shoes through the bed skirt. Even in the dark, it was visible. I don't know what he was doing on the bed, but he sat there for over 2 or 3 minutes before getting up. I heard him say under his breath, "F*** this." I heard all the drawers close, and then I heard footsteps walk back down the stairs. The door shut, and then I heard footsteps walking down the stairs to the living room. I called 911 now and whispered into the phone just to be safe. I stayed on the line and stayed under the bed for 10 to 15 minutes until one of the police officers showed up. I went down to meet them at the front door, and even that was tense. After letting them in, I told them everything. They did a sweep of the house, and during that, another officer arrived, this one female, who also assisted in the search. It turned out every window was unlocked, and one of the windows, the dining room one, was big enough for someone to crawl through. I gave a verbal statement of everything, was given a report number, and they left. When my parents returned home the next day, they already knew everything from my texts and phone call with them. We went to the police station with my report number and gave as much information as possible, such as text screenshots, including him admitting he was following me home. They said they'd investigate, though without solid proof it was him inside the house, it was tricky. I think the case lost steam when I really didn't have any proof of anything. I did, however, successfully get a restraining order against him and was advised to never accuse him of having broken in nor ever contact him again. He thankfully didn't, but from that point till the moment I moved out of my parents' house, I was always uncomfortable, fearing he might be creeping around outside. Even today, I sometimes fear he might find out where I currently live. I was in the 6th grade when this happened. It all started on the week of Halloween when I stayed after school to help decorate a haunted house for my school's Halloween carnival. I often got to stay and hang out with some of my friends while getting rewarded with pizza for helping. Along with my friends, there was also this other kid who would stay late. I'll call him Chris. We got along for the entirety of the time we stayed after school, and he never once gave me any reason to feel uneasy around him. He was genuinely a funny and cool kid. Fast forward 2 weeks, and I was suddenly approached by a group of girls in my grade who were all excited and had wide grins on their faces. I asked them what was going on, only for them to tell me that I had a secret admirer and that he would be texting me tonight. Now, I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't excited or at least curious about this. I wanted to know who it was. Later that night, when I was about to go to sleep, I got a notification from Messenger. It was the only app one had at the time that I always used to communicate with my parents whenever I was home alone. The message was from Chris. I had completely forgotten that I added him on Facebook on Halloween. I opened the message, and it read, "Maya, I need to talk to you." I was concerned and quickly replied, "Yeah, what's going on? Everything okay?" To this day, I wish I hadn't replied. The typing bubbles appeared and stayed there for a good 2 minutes, which meant he was still typing. It felt like forever until his message finally came through. I didn't expect what came next. In a long paragraph, he confessed his love for me and how I'd been driving him crazy since Halloween. He also proceeded to explain how he tried to impress me during recess with his soccer skills but that I never seemed to notice him. He said that he was growing tired of being ignored and ended with, "I want you to notice me." So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, will you be my girlfriend? I cringed at every word. I stared at the message for a long time. What the hell? I barely even know this kid. I drifted apart from him a long time ago. I was trying to come up with a way to let him down easily, as I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I told him I didn't like him like that and that I wanted to just be friends. I could tell right away that he didn't like this answer. He kept asking me why, and I had to come up with a reason each time until he eventually stopped answering. The next morning was a nightmare for me. Some of his friends kept coming up to me and telling me that Chris wanted to kiss me, which he told the entire grade he wanted to do, and that he would do it even if it meant cornering me. I should mention that I lived right across the street from my school, and everyone knew this, including Chris. Later that week, I was walking home from school. I hadn't even been inside my house for more than 2 minutes before I heard someone knocking on my front door. I peeked out the window just in time to see someone ducking behind a parked car across the street. It had to be Chris. My mom opened the door to find a piece of paper on the floor, and not surprisingly, it was addressed to me. I read the note out loud, and it said there was a surprise waiting for me under the Cadillac in my driveway, which at the time belonged to my brother. My mom went to check, only to find nothing. But after this day, my brother's Cadillac stopped working. I still have no idea what Chris did to the car, but my brother was forced to sell it. Unfortunately, my nightmare doesn't end there. I was constantly harassed by Chris's friends, telling me to give him a chance and that he would treat me right. There was even a moment when I caught Chris taking a picture of me walking home. The only reason I saw him was because I barely heard the sound of an iPhone camera behind me. Every morning, I woke up to a message from him with something along the lines of, "I can't wait to see you at school, or, "I bet you'll look beautiful today." The harassment and stalking were only getting worse, and it was making me fear for my safety, especially now that he knew where I lived. Finally, I got a call into the counselor's office, and I felt relieved, expecting her to tell me that Chris was going to get in trouble or that the cops would get involved. Instead, what I heard was worse. The counselor proceeded to tell me that boys will be boys, that they do crazy things when they're in love, and that I shouldn't be mad about this. She told me I should feel flattered, as this kind of stuff was bound to happen, and that the only thing I could do was to accept it and learn from it. At the time, I didn't see the problem with her words, as I genuinely believed her. But looking back on it now, this was an insane and disturbing thing to say to a sixth grader who was being sexually harassed and fearing for her safety almost every day. That afternoon, I came home from school and told my mom everything the counselor told me. She was rightfully furious. I was called to the principal's office again that same week, this time with my mom present. I remember very clearly my mom telling the counselor and principal, "What are you waiting for? For something bad to happen to her before you do something?" She continued to ask why it was taking so long for something to be done. They both stayed silent. My mom ended it by threatening the counselor and telling her to never speak to me again unless she was present. But unfortunately, I don't think the school ever did punish Chris, which to this day enrages me. He basically got away with everything. It doesn't even end there. One night during the weekend, when my parents had gone shopping, I was about to go to bed after watching a YouTube video on my iPad when I heard something at my window. Now, I'm on the second floor, so this was especially strange. The only thing that hits my window are birds accidentally flying into it. I sat up, listening, and then it happened again. It sounded as if someone had thrown something at the glass. Then it happened again and again. They were consistent thuds, and it was starting to freak me out. I finally got the courage to get up from my bed and see what it was. My heart dropped into my stomach when I opened the curtain and looked down to see Chris holding a handful of rocks, looking up at my window. He somehow had managed to figure out which window was mine. He was about to throw another when he noticed me. I could ever so slightly see that he was saying something, but I didn't stop to see what. I remember going to check if every window and door was locked, and thankfully, everything was. When I returned to my room, I received 4 messages from Chris. "Why did you leave? I just want to talk. I'm sorry. All I wanted was a kiss. Please forgive me. You are not who I thought you were. Bye." I blocked him after that. Thankfully, I never had another incident, even though I had to see him throughout the entirety of my school years, from 6th grade to senior year. The last thing I heard about him was that he was arrested. God only knows for what. The saddest and scariest part of my story, though, is the fact that a counselor was comfortable with telling me that this kind of behavior was a compliment and a learning experience for me as a girl. I just hope that woman no longer works with children and that I never have to see Chris again. I want to stay as anonymous as possible with this. This was a very serious occurrence that I have PTSD about, and unfortunately, it scarred me. I'm changing all towns and names in the story so there's no way it gets traced back to me. I've been a very reclusive person most of my life. It started at a young age. Even in my early school years, my teachers would tell my parents I had antisocial behavioral problems. I would even be included in some of the, I guess you'd say, special 20-minute classes for speech and behavior in elementary school. At the time, I didn't comprehend why I was being brought there while the rest of my class wasn't. Middle school was when the pressures of the social hell at school is really started to set in. Kids started forming their friend groups, and that only carried over into high school and got worse. I never had learning disabilities or anything. I just had social issues, which had gotten better as I've grown older, but I would still consider myself an awkward, introverted person. However, I've made my close friends, and I'm grateful for that. Now, let's talk about girls. Of course, being a social recluse comes with having trouble with the ladies. Honestly, not to get too graphic, but you know, it means something to my story. I lost my virginity at 21, that's a bit late, I'd say. This was at the age of 23. I moved out of my parents' place already. I had been working a high-paying job in my field for a couple of years at that point and bought a townhouse in my hometown. It was pretty affordable but a nice and big townhouse. It was the kind of place that would impress girls at 23 if you owned it. One day, swiping on Tinder, I matched with a pretty decent-looking girl. I'll call her Emily. We went on a date at a nearby restaurant for dinner. I was a little in my head, thinking she was judging me or I was acting awkward, and by the end of